Recently on Informed State of Mind last Saturday, a question was posed about how we should carry ourselves or act or dress for the defense, we'll say, in any post situation. Post being without rule of law, shit hits the fan, natural disaster, incursion, martial law, whatever, it doesn't matter. And I thought I would expound on that a little bit with a few things from the world of the Grayman that you could use in any said situation like that where there is opposition. Opposition can be anything you like, because it will apply regardless of what that opposition is. The opposition could very well be your neighbors. The most important thing to remember is to dress and act appropriately. Dress to your environment and your surroundings, and not draw attention to yourself. And that's going to vary in every situation, in every block, in every town, all over. You'll have to determine what that is. The most important thing that was slightly missed in that conversation wasn't whether or not we should wear this or that or carry this or that or how we should do things. It's how do we get the intel to make those decisions? And that's the first thing you got to go for. And you need to use every available asset you can to get that intelligence. So there is opposition. The world has changed, at least in your area. There's a certain amount of control being exhibited over your life unfairly against your will, and you have to deal with that. But there's going to be certain things that are still going to happen. So unless an opposition force comes in and stops the wheels from turning, they're probably still going to have things like school, and they're going to want to have public school. They're going to want to track people, get information, get public school records, find out addresses where people live. They're going to do that with utilities. They're going to do that with local organizations, businesses. That's going to happen regardless. So not attending those functions doesn't necessarily help you. So what I would suggest is send your kids to school, at least the first day or two. Because the thing is, kids talk, especially younger ones. Little Johnny talks to little Mary or little Bobby and finds out what they say, which is really just a mirror of what their parents say. And you can find out what the general consensus is, how the kids see it, who didn't show up to school, how the teachers see it. Essentially what you're doing is you're using your kid to do everything the opposition's going to do anyway. And granted, maybe you think, well, they're a little kid, they tell stories. Well, this is not the time to make rash judgments or believe that possibly those things are going to continue. It's a resource. You have to make your own decision, but it would be worthwhile. Another thing would be to attend church. In this nation, in our culture, people do that just by habit when significant events happen. I mean, you got to figure there's some sort of opposition, especially if it's state or regional or countrywide. People are going to be talking all kinds of things that are going to be religiously based, like the apocalypse. So showing up to church out of the blue if you don't already attend, or a different church than you do attend, isn't going to necessarily look that odd because people just don't know that that's what you do or don't do. The same way as a kid at school, you can get all that similar information. You can see what the preacher's preaching, see how they're talking about it, see how many of the opposition are present. Find out what people are doing. Find out what organizations exist in that church, whether it's music, drama, maybe they have their own education system, maybe they have a youth group, whatever, and see if those things are still happening or if they're canceling them. Because those are going to be used to track movements, and they may or may not get shut down, but at least you get a sense of what's going on in your area. And honestly, if you attend a church already, I would attend a different one. You can talk to those people anyway. Another thing to look at are clubs. Club organizations like the American Legion, the VFW, anything that's going to be generally conservative, and as well as some that are extremely liberal, like animal rights groups, environmental groups, are going to be looked at harshly, if not shut down completely. Whether they're shut down or not, those are a target, and I wouldn't recommend participating. I would say use your smarts, use your little gray man planning, and meet privately in small groups, 2, 3, 4, for something regular like a barbecue card, something that makes it look like this is what you do normally or would do, and it doesn't bother anybody. You're not bothered by the situation that's going on. You can carry on your discussions and figure things out amongst yourself and share information, because you're going to have to do a lot of this in the open, so you have to do it while being very, very smart about it. Another thing to look at for intel gathering is photo documentation. You have to assume that there'll be some sort of travel restrictions, because there probably will be. So while there's travel restrictions, one of the things you're going to do is travel either by foot or by bicycle. And generally, those will both go the same place. There's some areas where you're not going to walk, that you're going to ride, and vice versa. So what I would say is get yourself a couple, 3 digital cameras. The cheaper ones that are a little bit ruggedized, meant for the sport outdoor adventurous, not necessarily a GoPro, something that's a pocket deal. It only needs to be 8, 10 megapixels to get a decent picture. We're not photoshopping here. And those are relatively cheap these days. Then you want to get a significant amount of SIM cards for them, or SD cards, is what I mean, of different sizes. You got to remember things like the 4 speeds, all you need for film. You don't need to do video and then get, smaller amounts, 64 gig, 32, whatever, or even smaller than that, 256 megabyte, whatever they sell now that's really small, because it's going to hold a lot of photos and they're cheap. Now here's what you do. We talked in one of the previous ones about setting a pretense. Setting a pretense of having primary, secondary, alternate routes that you can follow based on certain movements, certain times of the day to do normal things like shopping, going to school, going to church, going to work, whatever. that you can put into position and execute when you need to, and it will look normal. If somebody follows you, it'll look like that's what you're supposed to be doing, look like that's what you mean to be doing, don't look suspicious. And then you can escape or evade or return to a safe area or meet at a rally point whenever that happens. So using a pretense ID with photographs, here's what you do. You have your routes that you're going to take, primary, secondary, alternate, whatever. You initially take those routes, or you could do it now, but you'd have to do it for several times a year because you have to consider time of day, environment, and you find locations, you put some planning into it where you might want to take photos, and then you start taking those photos ahead of time when nothing's there. Or you take a close-up macro shot of something with some stuff in the background slightly blurred, whatever. Or you take a picture of the sunset. Things that look like you're this amateur photographer who's out looking for something to do, and that's what you do, and it's not a big deal. Now, here's why you do that. You leave your location, you have your camera, and you load that SIM card in. Okay, now you need 2 of them. You don't necessarily have to have 2, but you could have 2 where you have photos in reverse order. But you have this camera, you have different photos in there that you've taken. You don't put date stamps, you don't put time stamps. In fact, you don't set any of that on your camera whatsoever, so it's hard to tell when that stuff was even taken. Going on your route, you initially start out with that loaded SIM card in there, and then when it's safe or when you need to take a picture and you figure out how to do it, you switch it out for that blank one. Take your surveillance photos, switch them back. Just like playing with magazines and guns, you got to practice this to do it smooth, do it quickly, not be seen, and have a way to hide that SIM card. And if you have to, get a condom, throw it in a condom, swallow the condom, and then get home and take some Benefiber or whatever. Might sound funny, but that's how drugs get smuggled, in condoms or in balloons. So find out the right materials to use for that. Then you can start building up a little photo database and get some intel. Thing is, you don't have to know much about the opposition to take photographs that would be worth it. Just seeing who's there, their locations, how they're spread out, how they're set up, time of day, whatever. And that'll work just fine. And then you keep rotating those SD cards. That way, if you get caught or questioned, you can I'm just taking photos, and you have all these bullshit innocuous photos of the area. Worst thing happens, they take your camera, they take the SIM card and give you the camera back. No big deal. Could you get arrested? Possibly. It's unlikely and it's a minimal risk. And some risk will have to be taken. Another thing you do in this situation is you would avoid major retailers. Target, Walmart, Kmart, Safeway, QFC, Kroger, whatever. Major retail locations are going to be swamped with people. They're the most popular, most well-known, easy to access, largest parking lots. They're on major traffic routes. They're going to have the most stuff, or at least that's what people think, and people are going to go there. Now, while you might think that's ideal to hide in the crowd and get location or get information, it's really not. It will be chaos. Think about Walmart videos every Christmas and people killing each other for the newest flat screen, a PlayStation, or some stupid kid's toy. Now you're in a real high-stress situation where everybody's flipped out? Yeah, probably not the best place to be, not to mention there'll be a high presence of the opposition. So what I suggest doing is going out on your own and doing things like paying your utilities in person, if you can do that. Then you can go in under the pretense of only listening and not questioning, unless it's a irrelevant question like you don't understand what's going on. So that when people start talking or somebody freaks out or somebody flips out and gets dragged away, you can just look at it like you have no idea what's going on. They're a crazy person. And then when you get up to the teller, if you're the next person, for example, you say, what the fuck is that guy's problem? And then either they shrug their arms at you and be like, oh, I don't know, I'm not going to say anything. Or they tell you something, and either way, your response is simply, oh, okay, like whatever, I don't care. And that could be a way to get some information, find out what's going on. You may overhear discussions of them talking to other people about utilities being shut off, how they're going to be controlled, rationing, whatever. That'd be the quickest way to get that information. Another thing is to go to secondhand stores. Some people call them low-income stores. I call them low-expenditure stores. Like the Goodwill, for example, Salvation Army, local mom-and-pop shops. Who knows how long they'll stay open, but there'll be less people in there, more likely to be talkative. A lot of those places don't have surveillance cameras even now, which is even better for you. And you can just do your normal shopping, looking around, pick up a few things. Places like Salvation Army are really great because they have all that little bullshit, trinkets and stuff in there. Nobody knows if you really need a shitty frying pan for your camping kit, an extra set of fork and knives because, you lost yours on the last camping trip or whatever. There's all kinds of different reasons you can be there that you can make them on the fly that could seem real. So it's a lot easier to have a cover story. So that gives you a lot of information. And the nice thing about avoiding major retailers and even fuel locations, gas stations, is you should already have that stuff on hand. I would presume that public events will be canceled. Fairs, festivals, intramural sports, anything like that. If they're not, I'd be very suspicious about attending. Easy to get observed. It's easy to get snatched. Not everybody's going to be having a good time anyway, and it could just add stress. And even if you do participate in local events like church or a club or a private organization, I still would second guess the idea of any type of after school or intramural sports. Even though you're getting a lot of information from your kids and it seems like a good time to talk to parents because that'd be normal because you're watching sports, probably not. While that could easily get volatile, it's one way to track your movements where it's extremely likely that you can be observed and documented for what you're doing, not to mention another way to document a location where people are to set some sort of pattern to see where people are typically meant to be. But the idea of gathering intel is so minimal that just going to a store one day, sending your kid to school one day, going to church another day, that's a lot of intelligence collection. And while the information may seem minimal, you get somebody that knows how to analyze that information, put things together, and you get 4 or 5 people, even in your neighborhood, even in a large neighborhood with that kind of information, and can get it to them, they can figure a lot of information out. So you don't really have to put yourself out there. Another thing is to consider is not carrying anything, meaning seriously ask yourself if you need a purse or a backpack or a satchel or anything like that. Maybe if you want to carry something empty, strapped down, folded up on your bicycle, and then you unfold it to go in the store so you have something to carry your groceries home in, understandable. Just make sure everybody sees exactly what you're doing with it. The reason why is you're a target. You're a target for several things, not just thieves, but let's just say in the initial situation where the opposition has arrived, some of the things they're going to do are checkpoints. They're going to do inspections. It's going to be just like going through TSA or whatever else. You got a bag or a purse, they're going to go through it. Bags and purses are threats. They hold guns. They hold explosives. They hold phones, intelligence, papers, documents, money, identification, all kinds of normal things that are supposed to be in there. So if you choose to carry it, especially a purse, make sure you have all the normal junk you would have in there. But honestly, I wouldn't carry any of that at all. Strongly advise against it. Now, the thing is you have to accept the fact that you're probably going to be detained at some point. Somebody's going to be detained that you know, and they need to be prepared for as much as they can for that. Things to presume about any sort of detention is that you'll be photographed. In this day and age, there'll probably be an iris scanner for identification, as well as fingerprints and photos of any documentation showing who you are. And don't be surprised if in some situations, depending on who the opposition is, they come house to house to collect that information, in which case you need to have it readily available. You look more cooperative. They're going to get it anyway. Pick your fights to win. Don't pick fights you can't win. There's no point in standing up arguing you have this right and that right when they're going door to door when you can't win. Another thing is to assume is that there'll be strip searches if there's any form of detention, possibly photographs while you're being strip searched. Photographs for scars, tattoos, any identifying mark, obvious injuries, things like that. At some point, there'll be a certain amount of assault involved, no matter who the opposition is, whether you feel you're being assaulted during the detention, whether they assault you while you're naked, whether they assault you during any form of interrogation process, or why you just feel like you're being assaulted on period because you're locked up somewhere. You have to presume that you have no rights. Quite frankly, who's going to give them to you? Who's going to enforce them? The common belief of the nations, as silly as it is, that could possibly come here to institute any sort of United Nations whatever, they're not going to execute anything that sounds like Geneva Convention, let alone care about your Constitution. Don't think that if a martial law event happened, that would be any different. All kinds of things in the Constitution get suspended for all kinds of reasons. And the thing is, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter if you agree with it or not. If they got the guns and the manpower and they're dragging you around by the ears, all you can do is survive. You'll also have to presume there's going to be abuse, physical, mental, and psychological. Some people, the physical abuse will be what gets them because they're not used to taking a hit, or they have lots of injuries, or they can't combat that anymore, or even they have medication requirements for different reasons. For some people, it'll be the mental. Mental abuse is probably the worst because you take your time to inflict it. You feed and prey on existing conditions, and if you can identify what those are, because I've done it, I can tell you right now, it could affect you for the rest of your life. The most effective, though, in the short term will be psychological, and understanding that they're either telling the truth or they're not. And quite frankly, in the world of intelligence and the Grayman living, it's okay to have assumptions. There's a difference between assumptions and presumptions, but they both have their place. Assume you'll have no rights. Presume they're always lying. Presume they don't have your best interests in mind. And assume that what they threaten you with is going to happen regardless if you cooperate or not. Figure out and learn different interrogation techniques to see what's going to be thrown at you and why. Settle yourself with the idea of the things they're going to discover they're going to use against you. You might stand a chance. So hopefully these are just a few ideas that you can use, figure out, try on your own. Maybe you'll come up with a few your own. If you come up with some other ideas, throw them in the comments so other people can see them. If you have any ideas about something you want to hear, throw those in the comments. I'll see about doing a video or speaking on one of the panels. Remember, if you're not a regular follower, resist the tyranny on Sunday, form state of mind on Saturday.